morning, good morning. We're being serenaded there by the dog. So today's task, I've got my boots on this morning. The grass is really wet and I'm discovering that my About Town boots aren't actually waterproof. So if you're watching live this morning, do leave me the hashtag live, or of course a lovely comment saying whereabouts in the world you are. And if you're watching later on today when the replay goes live, leave me the hashtag replay and we can catch up for a chat in the comments. Today's project, I am going to be cutting Lobelia Hot Lips from the garden. It's getting a little bit leggy. It's the dog isn't allowed out until gone 8 o'clock in the morning in order that her barking doesn't wake the neighbours. And to be fair, she doesn't bark much, but she does a walk of the grounds and she's barking at the pigeons. If it does get too much, I'm going to have to give her a stern no and send her back into the kitchen. So she does a trail around. I think we have a cat that comes into the garden. She follows the scent of the cat around, and we sometimes have foxes as well. So she's just marking out her territory. And normally it settles down after a few minutes. I might have to send her back in. Maggie? That normally does it if I do the point. The point and stare, the Paddington stare. That clearly hasn't worked. I'm sure she'll settle in a minute. But hopefully the barking is distracting me more than it's distracting you. So a beautiful autumnal morning. Yesterday when we got up, we had rain and I thought, oh my goodness, it's going to be the start of those horrible wet days, but by lunchtime it was blue skies and sunshine, and today the sky is not a cloud in the sky and it's that lovely milky bluiness of the sky and the hint of a hot summer day that you're going to get a really intense blue by lunchtime. So promising. The sun's out, it's chilly though, and as I'm sitting here, I'm sitting on a garden rug on the step on my patio. And it's just getting to that stage now and I'm thinking, I know when the video is going to be over because it's going to be far too cold to be sitting out here in just a long sleeve t-shirt and a jumper. I'm sure that must be the last of the barking by now. So Lobelia Hot Lips. Now, probably the flower I like least in our garden is Lobelia Hot Lips. It's very straggly. The flower is really insignificant and I do not like the scarlet flash. So the reason that we've got this plant in my garden is my husband is the gardener and he spotted this and he obviously liked the qualities of it. Now he spotted it by the front door of a house further down the road, a little brick built cottage which is a listed building and I think probably may have been connected with the gunpowder industry. So Faversham was, I think, the very important centre of gunpowder production up until the end of the First World War. If only I knew more history about the place where I live. And it was squeezed into what looked like, sometimes you get those parts of your garden where nothing will grow. So it was squeezed into the front door next to this cottage and seemed to be, a good grower and gave a good show of colour, right the way through the year. But I don't really like it. I think it's too straggly. I don't like the colour. And the flowers are just too dotty. So I brought it upon myself to actually, we've got it in the back garden and the front, and I've been out before I filmed, and I've cut it back, cut part of it back quite heavily. And that wasn't only because it was overhanging the lawn. I thought if I cut this back quite heavily, perhaps it won't regenerate over the winter and it might actually die and then we could get something else to go there. So I'm being a little bit sneaky and thought what I would do is cutting it back instead of just putting it on the compost heap, because gardening isn't my job. I haven't actually cut this back in the gardening sense. I have cut it to use as a cut flower, and that is the plan for the day. That I've got these sort of cottagey like flowers, and then my modern equivalent of a classic urn vase. I know it's not an urn, but I do think this shape is a really good shape for a modern vase. So very unusually for me, I bought this from a real live shop. I bought it from IKEA for £10 a few years ago, and we've got an electric car. And for a while they were running a deal at IKEA where if you recharge your car at IKEA, they would give you a token to spend inside the shop. So this was my free vase because we filled up using their charging points of the electric car on a journey to go out and see my mum and dad, and I bought this vase, and I just thought it was a really a classic shape. I don't think it's going to date, so quite modern but not so way out. It's ceramic and it's grey and it pretty much goes with everything. And from my trip to I was going to say Holland then. Good morning, Julie. Oh, good morning. I think oh, the scent of the flowers. Yes, yes. Joan's saying that it's got a scent to it, and it has. You can. I'm not sure you can smell it when you sniff it, but certainly when I was working with it, when I was knocking the plant with my hands, a bit like eucalyptus. I'm not sure I can smell eucalyptus when it's just sitting there, but as soon as you touch it, the aroma gets released, and it certainly just has a smell. I'm not sure I actually like the smell. It's almost like that smell, you know, the smell of tomatoes when you've picked them off the vine. I don't really like that smell. I find it a bit acrid, really, but it does have a scent to it, and that's a lovely thing to do as well. Sitting out in the garden and immersing ourselves in the sights and the smells and the sound of what's around us. So it was quite nice to do that, I must admit, though. There's a few telltale signs. So the rule is in our house, I can pick whatever I want from the garden as long as my husband can't see what I've picked from. He doesn't want me, picking all the good stuff and having a bare patch. So as I crept across the front garden and our bedrooms and the front of the house, my shoes were leaving footprints in the grass. So I'm sure that as when my husband gets up in the morning, he'll open the curtains, and I'm sure he'll be eagle-eyed and he'll be able to still see these little impressions in the garden. Right then, he finished barking. So I'll have to see of course he's going to see that I've cut it. Because he's going to notice this huge vase of flowers in the living room. So what I've decided to do is it's not so much an arranging. I would say if you're thinking of you want to arrange some flowers to bring indoors, it doesn't always have to be arranged in a classic shape. So for instance, I taught a class in Canterbury this week. Good morning, Linda. How are you? And we were all about the shapes. It's a beginner's floristry course, so it's all about the building blocks for getting your arrangements done. But sometimes that can be a little bit restrictive. If you want to be really, really creative, sometimes it can feel restrictive. If you've got to remember you only have to have 5 of these and 7 of these, you've got to do it in a certain shape, and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. And I think it can put you off. And I would say if you enjoy flowers and you want to bring those flowers into your home, a little bit of the garden inside, don't be het up by the rules. And the easiest way of doing that is to collect your flowers, your plant material, and you could do this just with Greenery, and put it en masse into a container. So this is something I noticed when I went on my trip to Florist in Belgium the other week. And just looking at the way that things have been styled, and even things in the Christmas shop in the garden centre we went to, it wasn't all itsy bitsy stuff. All the faux greenery had been displayed. I know it was displayed for sale, but styled, arranged, and it was just put in one big pot, and it looked like these topiaries because it was just en masse. So that is the plan for today. I'm going to take my vase and arrange my flowers en masse. I'm just wondering if I lean across and get my patio chair, whether I can put my vase up there so you can see it. Look, gosh, nearly there. It's rocking. Let's bring that round a little bit, like that. And I'm going to do something, again, it's not difficult to do. It's one of those jobs, and it's about not thinking of your flower arranging as a task that needs to be done, another chore that you need to tick off, and then you start to become a bit resentful about it. It's all just about sitting, and actually, on that thought of sitting, I did bring myself out a cup of tea, partly because I thought I don't know if you can see it, but I can see the steam rising. And it reminds me of that autumn time when you breathe out. And we used to tell, I remember walking to school with my mum, and we'd say, look, Mum, I'm smoking. So a nice cup of tea. Dress up warmly so you're not, getting unduly cold. I am sitting on a blanket because I'm sitting on a brick step, and it was a bit cold on my bottom when I was doing that. And then just letting your mind drift. So what I'm doing here, this plant is quite leggy. It's got quite woody stems, and then these finer branches coming off with these little leaves. So I'm going to put them in the vase. Of course, it's not quite as easy as that. If you put your flowers in the vase just like that, with all the green leaves on the side, if they're in the water, and I sometimes use the rule of even if they're inside the neck of the vase, I take them off, because if they're actually in the water, they will rot. And then the bacteria involved in that will shorten the life of your flowers. And I do tend to take everything that's going to be, my water's probably up to about here, I take everything off, because I just think it gets a bit constricted and they start to sweat a little bit. And on the subject of sweating, well, it's not really that. Because of the cost of living crisis and the energy issue, we've been, well, I say we, the royal we, my husband's been going around the house, just seeing that everything is warm and secure and all the rest of it. He's turned the notch down on how hot our water gets. And I will say I've discovered that I like a really hot shower and a really hot bath. So I'm banned from having baths because it takes too much water and it takes too long to heat. But I'm finding that the shower isn't hot enough for me. And I was asking my daughter about that the other day. Are you finding the shower okay? And she says, yes, it's fine. You just need to turn it up. And I'm thinking, I thought I had it up full blast. So I might have to enter negotiations, see if I can offer up something else as a cost-saving contribution to the household in return for the water temperature to be turned up a little bit. So you'll have to let me know whether what you're doing to save energy and save some money this winter. And then the other thing we did have, coincidentally, our loft re-insulated. It had very small amount of loft insulation, so we had the full depth of insulation put in and loft boards put down. The house is definitely warmer when you wake up in the morning. And I can remember when last winter when we went to bed, you'd walk up our stairs and you could gradually feel it getting colder and colder. So it has evened out the temperature in the whole house. The only problem is, because everything is now sealed and secured, I've noticed that we've got condensation. When I open the curtains in our front room, there's condensation, and we do quite often get condensation there, but it's happening a little earlier in the year. So I'm going to have to enter into negotiations to say, do you think we can, we've got one of these balloons that go up the chimney, our fireplace, and we don't often use the fireplace, but I don't want to ever have it blocked off, because I like the thought that come the winter time we would have a fire. And we have over the years had fires, but probably we have about 1 or 2 a year. So it doesn't get well used, and it probably is a good idea to block it off so that the heat isn't escaping. I'm just going to trim that off at the top there because it's broken. But we're not getting that natural fresh air circulation, and I've had to wipe the windows down because they're getting a bit soggy, and there was a little bit of that mould on my cloth when I did that this morning. So I'm going to have to call it an annual general meeting and discuss that over the kitchen table. I was going to say when my husband was having breakfast, but I might not pounce that on him first thing. I will talk to him about that later on in the day. So I quite like this idea of arranging and saving things from the compost heap, sort of intercepting them. And as I sit here, if I wasn't talking to you, I'd be sitting in silence. There's something broken there. And I'll have to decide at the end, was it worth doing? Does it just look like a tangle of stems, or is it something pleasing to look at? Probably with one of these arrangements, because it is really itty-bitty, the flower, that you're losing what it looks like because the background, the garden is, busy. So I will put this in, probably in my front room, my dining room, and I quite like the paint we got on the walls today. It's where I tend to do a lot of my photographs for my Facebook and Instagram posts, because the walls are grey and it's like a a neutral background to arrange on. So I'm just going to let this spill out all over the place. Now, talking about Instagram, I read a really interesting Instagram post the other day all about flower foam. So this whole move about trying to go foam free and why flower foam was developed in the first place, or the perceived benefits at the time of flower foam. And rather interestingly, when we arranged flowers foam free, we just arranged what we had in the garden, and it would be all, stems that were waving this way and that and all buckling round. The thing I am trying to do with this, that's too long, is to try and keep all the stem lengths about the same so it doesn't look too wayward. I'm going to cut them down there. And it was saying that when you arrange flowers in natural stems, actually it's probably quite a good example here, I can get my flowers to hang below the rim of the container. But as the flower market and the demand for flowers grew and people started growing them commercially, they were much easier to transport when they fitted in a box and they were grown to a standard length. So as the floristry industry grew, things were grown. It wasn't a matter of cutting from the kitchen garden and taking it to market in that sense. They were being grown to be a set length so they could fit in boxes and they could presumably get air freighted around. And the problem then was, if you've got all straight stems, how do you get the stems to flow and hang down over your container as they would have done naturally? And that is when they, I guess, hand in hand with the petrochemical industry and all the byproducts of the oil and gas that we use, is when they developed the flower foam as a water source that came above the height of the container in order that you could angle your flowers down. And if you've ever been to class with me, and one of the first questionings we talk about is how much flower foam you would have needed in your container, I always say that the flower foam needs to stand proud at the edge of your container, and that's the reason why. And it's only the other day that I sort of put two and two together to actually work out, you do things habitually, and sometimes it just takes, reading someone else's point of view for you to think, actually, oh, that's why we do it. So I thought that was really interesting. So it kind of fits that whole thing of being more environmentally aware, because flower foam is a single-use plastic, and this whole problem of, you might get the biodegradable kind, but it breaks down. Biodegradable means it breaks down into smaller, is it microplastic, to smaller and smaller pieces, so it's different to compostable. And I was reading in the paper the other day that they are now finding microplastics, I think that's the right word, doesn't quite sound right to me, in mother's breast milk. So it's it's leaching out from, landfill and whatever, and getting into our water sources, presumably, and things that we eat, we're ingesting it unintentionally. So it's sort of going back to perhaps a slower pace of life. So I'm lucky that I've got a garden I can pick from, even though they are these awful hot lip lobelias, which I really don't like. But I'm just, making it. I'm arranging, and the other thing when you're arranging your flowers is you need to decide whether your arrangement's going to be viewed all the way around. Are you going to put it on your coffee table so you can see it all the way around, or is it going to be front facing, i.e. pushed up against a wall? So most of my arrangements, because sometimes I put them on the kitchen table, but it sort of gets mixed up with the food, constantly having to move them. So on the whole, my arrangements are always front facing. So I'm just making sure that I know where the front is. So when I turned it all round, it sort of looked a bit different. It's like, so actually you're getting the side view. I've actually got the prettier view because I can see more of the red flowers. And what I'm doing as I snip along the top bits is just some sort of dead stems with nothing on the end. And then as I push them together, this is quite a branched piece, I'm just gently squeezing them together and then pushing them into my vase, like that. And what I'll probably do when I finally do look at the, arrangement seems like quite an exaggerated word, that I will stand back and look. So it's always a good thing. Not so much being critical of you and your skills and yourself, but you just need to have an appreciative roaming eye. So if you suddenly discover that you've got a twig here, it's just too big, cut it out. Just cut out that single stem and go right in with your scissors and do that, or just trim. What I would never do is is cut the outer edges. That makes me laugh, because when I taught flower arranging classes at my daughter's primary school, the children that came to class used to be a bit snap happy with their scissors, and they'd make these lovely little arrangements, and then they decided that something was too long and they would just cut the flowers. And I think really they enjoyed the sensation of using the scissors and that nice snapping sound, and the fact that they were totally changing the look. So they'd make all these pretty arrangements with flowers, and then they would go along and they'd just get carried away and they'd be cutting them on the edges like this, and they'd go from changing to be really pretty little flower arrangements to just these green spiky things, and then they'd take them out to their parents at the school gate. That classic thing, oh, that looks lovely, darling. And I'm thinking, well, it did look lovely about half an hour ago, but they've gone a bit wild with the scissors. So putting those in like that. And of course, you kind of have to have eye, not only whether you're going to be front facing, or see, it's slightly more colour on my side, but also how much space you've got. So there's no point in making something absolutely massive when you're sitting in your garden or sitting at your kitchen table if it's not going to fit your place. So I know that on my sideboard I can move things around if it's too big, but I quite like something that just feels a bit opulent, especially if you are, conscious that your bills are going up and you haven't got spare money for this, that and the other. If you can bring something in from your garden and bring lots of it in, it just makes it feel like you're living that a little bit of that luxury life, and you've enjoyed doing it and you're getting to know your garden. And also this is a way of testing the vase life of your flowers. So these flowers looking a bit wayward, probably at some point my husband was going to cut them back anyway, but I might as well use them and enjoy them instead of it just being a gardening job. You're taking a little bit of enjoyment from something that you're doing anyway. So it's the heads I kind of want to balance up, and again you probably find it hard to differentiate when my flower arrangement starts and the garden stops and the garden starts. So I'm sort of wanting perhaps the flowers, because they're so insignificant, to sort of sit at the same level going round, and then I can cut the stuff. And so if I lifted that up, can you see it's just the plain stems? Well, on the whole it's the plain stems. And what I might just do before I actually put this in my front room is I might just fill up again with water. I'm just wondering, as I put my hand down, whether the stems are actually reaching where the water is. So what I normally do then is take my arrangement to the kitchen tap, put my hand inside, run the tap in, and as soon as I can feel my fingertips are getting wet, I know that I've got enough water in there. So here we go. It's got quite a long stem. So my thoughts are turned to Christmas. Are yours? I seem to have skipped autumn. I don't want to skip autumn too much. I think I've lost where the front is there. Too much chatting. No, perhaps that is still the front. I like to plant bulbs in order that they flower, if not in time for Christmas, at least for the winter months in the new year. And last year, as my flowers went over, they flowered, I sort of tipped the whole containers and the soil and the bulbs into a crate in the garden, which is under our kitchen windowsill. So I need to go through those and think about planting those. So I think that might be my job for next week, to go through them. And I want to be quite careful because I had lots of different bulbs and I want to plant like with like. So I need really to take them by old clump in order that I keep the like bulbs together. Unless I don't know if I'll be able to tell, because I'm not a plant woman really, whether I will just be able to recognise them. I could recognise a tulip bulb and a daffodil bulb, but I also had, what did I have? Grape hyacinths, but I think I had them in white and blue. So I don't really want white and blue mixed up. So I need to sort through those, and then I need to find some containers, whether they're the same ones I used last year or slightly different ones, so I can start planting those up. And I have also bought some forced bulbs, some hyacinth bulbs. So really, if you're thinking you might want some hyacinths for Christmas or that early period in the New Year, you need to be buying the forced variety if you're growing them indoors now. And we have them for sale in there's a plant stall in town, at our little market in town. And I bought them a couple of weeks ago, because last year when I thought about buying them, they only had the regular garden hyacinth bulbs, not the ones that have been prepared. I don't quite understand what the prepared thing is, whether they've given it because I think naturally for the bulbs to flower they have to go through that cold period first, and then as the soil and the air warms up they start to flower. So I don't know whether prepared means they've had some sort of chemical attached to them, or whether it means they've been frozen or put down at a cold temperature in order that they've sort of been through an artificial winter in order that they flower. If you know more about that, do let me know. I'd love to. All these things we take for granted and we don't really understand what happens. So pushing lots in there. My compost bucket is getting really full up. And then it's the last little stray pieces. How much do I want to just throw straight in the compost bucket? And how much I can fit into my vase. I think I've just got these last few pieces left. I'll just recut those. Just so they've got a fresh wound so they can start taking out the water, and put those last few stems. Actually, that's probably quite good. Those last ones, because they had sort of fallen by the wayside, were actually a little bit shorter. So it does give me a sort of a flow out from the front of the vase like that. So it is quite insignificant, but I think it's insignificant but impactful. Can you have the same thing? The flowers are tiny, but because I've grouped them all together, it's going to have more impact than if I'd used this in another arrangement. So sometimes just having something concentrated just really draws your eye to it. So I think actually I don't mind these in a vase, and it does look, it's not quite as wild, I mean it does look fairly wild, but it's slightly more curated than you might think, because I've tried to keep everything at about a height, and I haven't precisely done the little wayward bits, but when I look through behind me at the flower bed, and if I was to put this in the flower bed, you would be able to tell that this was a curated vase of flowers, because naturally in the flower bed they're growing up in individual clumps and spikes. So I have sort of given myself something that isn't just, is a cut and plonk, but it has got more effort put in it, and I could with every confidence put this on the side and say it was a flower arrangement and not some sort of gardening accident that had come indoors to keep me company. So my fingertips are getting a tiny bit cold, so it's probably time to say goodbye. And for those of you who are joining me today at 12 noon, I will see you at Zoom flower class. If you're interested in the Zoom flower class, if you comment Zoom underneath the video, I can come back to you with details about the class. There's 8 sessions. We're on week 3 today, so you've missed 2 classes, but you can still sign up, because I will send you the video recording of the classes you've missed, and then going forward you've got the option of joining the class live or watching the recorded version of the class a time that suits you. I will say that if you're able to join live, I think you will get more out of the class, because we have a live Q&A, a live make and create session afterwards, the bit I don't film. And so it really does feel as close as a classroom situation as possible. You'll start to get to know the other people in the class. You find out what materials they've bought. you know, what they're adapting. I know that one of the ladies who's watching isn't going to be using eucalyptus for her class today. She's going to cut hebe from her garden. So it's all these little twists and turns in the way we all interpret the project. So if you can't catch me on Zoom, there are a whole library of free videos, of course, over here on YouTube, which you're welcome to watch. And if you want to know whether I got a specific video on something, again, drop me a comment and I'll either direct you to the video you need to watch, or I will add it to my list of things that I will film in the future. And also, if you want to catch up on previous Zoom flower classes, they are for sale on my website. So you want to go to juliedavisflowerworkshops.co.uk. If you go to the shop tab, and then you'll see the videos there, you need to scroll down the page. So there's, you know, if you love Christmas videos, there's 2 series of Christmas videos. I think we did 10 in the first year, which I think must have been during lockdown. I think we did 9 classes last year. So if Christmas is your thing, you know, it may be that you want to sign up to receive those videos, and then you can have your own little class on how to create Christmas flower arrangements. So I'm going to say goodbye for now, and I'll see you at 12 if you're catching me on Zoom. And if you're on Facebook, don't forget to join my free Facebook group, Flower Start World. And I will leave all these links in the description of the video once it does go, it's published, so you can re-watch it. And I normally go live in my Facebook group at 12 noon on a Friday, so you've got lots of opportunity to catch up with me. So I will take a photograph of that and I'll put it on the community pages when I've finished against the plain background, and you can let me know whether this will be the kind of thing that you might think of doing. Perhaps if you're trimming back in your garden, save some of those trimmings to bring indoors to create a stylised but natural, low-key flower arrangement. And of course you would have had a lovely mindful opportunity just to sit and be still with just the sound of you, the dog barking, and your scissors snipping away. So that's all from me for now, and I'll catch up with you same time, same place next week. All right then. Slurp of tea. And then on for the day. Oh, thank you, Linda. It's lovely to chit chat with you too. And I'll see you next week. Oh, in the group, Linda. Bye-bye. Bye.